Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep on this guy, Bob Camblin.
Oh, yeah, really interesting Houston artist.
Yeah, his work is it's so thought-provoking and also just kind of mysterious.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to be using a collection of his quotes,
Okay.
and we're also going to be taking a look at one of his paintings, specifically called Dance Amigo.
Interesting.
And we've got a couple of other sources here.
Okay.
A YouTube video analysis, and then also an excerpt from an art book.
Great.
That gives us some different perspectives. So
Yeah.
this should be a good deep dive for anyone who likes uncovering little hidden gems, of knowledge
Yeah.
and exploring different creative perspectives.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I found really interesting right off the bat
Yeah.
was that we don't have much in the way of like biographical information about Bob Camblin.
Yeah, it's intriguing how little we actually know about him. Like, it almost feels like a deliberate choice,
Yeah.
to sort of force us to engage with his art and his ideas.
Yeah.
Just on their own terms without, like, knowing about the person.
Right. Like he's just saying, here's the work.
Right.
You make the connections.
Yeah.
So let's start making some of those connections.
Okay.
So we've got these quotes that span from like 1966 to 1974.
Okay.
And they're kind of all over the place, but in like the best way, touching on like art philosophy and nature, even Zen Buddhism.
Wow.
But there's one quote that really like grabbed me.
Oh, okay. Which one?
And it says, if you argue or if you agree, you may learn, but you do not communicate. That's pretty bold, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a really bold statement. Like, it seems like he's kind of challenging, like, what we think of when we think of communication.
Uh-huh.
He's really pushing us to think outside of language and, the limitations of language.
Right.
And that true communication happens on this deeper level.
So how does he actually achieve that, though?
Right.
I mean, his paintings are visually, they're striking. But how do they go beyond just like being pretty?
Right. Well, I think, think about what Zen Buddhism emphasizes. That direct experience and intuition and connecting to something beyond, the rational mind.
Uh-huh.
And I think Camblin's paintings, especially Dance Amigo, seem to really operate in that same space.
Okay.
They're not about conveying this specific message,
Right.
but more about kind of evoking a feeling or a state of being.
Okay, so I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
But for those of us who maybe aren't as familiar with like Zen Buddhism,
Right.
can you unpack that a little bit more? What does that actually like look like in a painting?
Yeah. So imagine you're looking at Dance Amigo and you see this figure,
Uh-huh.
this dual-faced figure.
Okay.
And one side is bathed in this light, almost golden light,
Right.
and the other shrouded in shadow.
Right.
And it's not really a literal representation of anything, but it really speaks to that duality that I think we all, experience within ourselves,
Mhm.
And even in the universe itself.
Yeah.
And that's where that Zen connection, I think, comes in because, Zen Buddhism really emphasizes this interplay of opposites.
Right.
That light and dark, good and evil, they're not really separate entities. They're two sides of the same coin.
So Camblin's painting is not trying to like tell us what to think,
Right.
but it's more like prompting us to feel that duality,
Yeah.
to kind of experience it ourselves.
Exactly. Like, he's using this visual language to create an experience that goes beyond words.
Right.
It's like he's saying, don't just look at this painting, like, feel it.
Uh-huh.
Let it wash over you.
That's fascinating. And it makes me think of another one of his quotes. He says, not a leaf moves, and yet we all feel the cool breeze. It's like he's talking about this like subtle interconnectedness
Yeah.
that we can sense, but maybe not always explain.
Right.
And maybe that's what he's doing with Dance Amigo too.
Yeah.
Creating this space where we can feel that connection without needing words to like define it.
I think you're right on the money there. It's like he's using art as a way to tap into
Yeah.
that unspoken, maybe even unspeakable realm of experience.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got these like thought-provoking quotes that kind of hint at his philosophy a little bit. And we know that Dance Amigo embodies this idea of communication that's like beyond language.
Right.
But before we jump into the different interpretations of the painting itself, let's like set the scene a little bit.
Okay.
Can you kind of paint us a picture of Dance Amigo based on the descriptions that we have?
Sure. So imagine a canvas dominated by this single figure
Okay.
with two faces.
Uh-huh.
And one face is bathed in this warm, almost golden light, while the other is covered in these cool, shadowy hues.
Okay.
And the brush strokes around the head are swirling, energetic, giving this impression of movement almost like an aura.
And it's not like a realistic depiction, right?
Yeah.
It's more about capturing like the essence
Right.
of this figure, almost like a dream.
Precisely. And at the bottom of the painting, there are these bold gestural sweeps of like dark pigment that partially obscure the title Dance Amigo.
Okay.
So it's like even the title itself is caught in this interplay of light and shadow,
Right.
inviting us to look deeper.
It's like he's deliberately playing with our expectations.
Yeah.
Like we're expecting this clear image, a straightforward title, but he's giving us fragments
Right.
and forcing us to like piece it together.
Right. And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting is we've got these pieces of the puzzle.
Mhm.
You know, we've got these enigmatic quotes from Camblin. We've got this visually striking painting.
Yeah.
And then we've got these different perspectives offered by the YouTube video and the art book.
Right.
And by examining each piece carefully, hopefully we can start to understand that deeper message that Camblin's trying to get across.
Absolutely. Okay. So we've kind of set the stage with Camblin's philosophy and like a visual sense of Dance Amigo.
Right.
So let's tackle those different interpretations head on, starting with the YouTube video.
Okay.
They really leaned into that whole Zen Buddhism thing, right?
Yeah, they really do. They see the dual-faced figure as this representation of yin and yang, you know?
Uh-huh.
Like those complementary forces that are constantly interacting, you
Wow.
know, light and shadow action and stillness, creation and destruction.
Right.
It's all part of that balance.
Yeah, and that totally connects back to Camblin's quote about like finding the perfectly average view of the universe.
Right.
Like embracing both sides of the coin.
Exactly.
But this video also mentions hexagram 22
Oh.
from the I Ching
Oh.
Grace,
Right.
which might need a little bit of explaining for folks who aren't familiar.
Yeah, absolutely. So the I Ching is this ancient Chinese text that's used for divination.
Okay.
And each hexagram represents like a different situation or a state of being.
Okay.
And hexagram 22, Grace, talks about the beauty that's found in contrast and change. It suggests that, you know, true grace doesn't come from like striving for some unattainable perfection,
Right.
but like embracing those imperfections, the paradoxes, you know, that life throws at us.
So connecting that back to Dance Amigo, they're saying the painting itself embodies this idea of grace,
Yeah.
of finding beauty in that tension.
I think that's a very valid interpretation.
Yeah.
You know, the two faces that have contrasting light and shadow,
Right.
even the way the title is partially obscured,
Right.
it all kind of speaks to that tension, that dynamic interplay.
Yeah.
And like the I Ching suggests it's within that interplay, you know, that acceptance of what is that we find beauty and meaning.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Makes me think about how we often try to like force things into these like neat categories,
Uh-huh.
label things as like good or bad, right or wrong.
Right.
But Camblin's like, hey, it's all part of the same dance.
Exactly. Like he's inviting us to step outside of those rigid categories and experience the world in its totality.
Right.
Now, shifting gears a little bit to the art book.
Okay.
It takes a more formal approach.
Okay.
And it analyzes Dance Amigo in terms of, you know, specific art movements and influences.
Okay.
So they mention expressionism,
Uh-huh.
which for those who maybe aren't art historians is all about using color and brushwork to kind of convey emotion
Right.
rather than creating a realistic depiction.
Okay.
And they point to the swirling brushstrokes around the figure's head
Right.
and how the colors almost vibrate with energy.
Yeah, is that what they're seeing as expressionistic?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about capturing the feeling, you know, the inner state of the figure
Right.
rather than just like depicting their outward appearance.
Okay.
They also see elements of surrealism,
Okay.
particularly in the use of like multiple faces in a single portrait,
Right.
which was something that surrealist artists often did to, you know, represent different layers of consciousness or the fragmented nature of identity in the modern world.
They also bring up Francis Bacon,
Yeah.
who's known for his like pretty intense
Yeah.
and sometimes kind of grotesque portraits.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see a little bit of a connection there,
Mhm.
but Dance Amigo doesn't feel quite as like unsettling
Right.
as some of Bacon's work does it.
You're right. There is a difference in tone.
Yeah.
But I think what they're highlighting is that shared interest in, you know, exploring the human face as this site of transformation, this reflection of inner turmoil and psychological complexity.
Right.
And so while Camblin's approach is, you know, less overtly disturbing, there's still that sense of something unsettling, something hidden beneath the surface.
It's like he's inviting us to look beyond the facade.
Right.
And to confront the messy reality of, like, what it means to be human.
Exactly.
And the book also mentioned Fauvism,
Yes.
known for its bold colors and, like, spontaneous brushwork.
Uh-huh.
And they even see hints of Marc Chagall in the, like, dreamlike quality
I like it.
of the painting.
Yeah.
It's amazing how one painting can contain echoes of so many different, like, artistic styles.
It really speaks to Camlin's ability to kind of synthesize these diverse influences
Yeah.
and create something entirely unique. He's clearly engaging in a dialogue with art history,
Right.
but he's not simply imitating.
Right.
He's absorbing those influences and transforming them into something new.
Okay, so we've got Zen interpretation.
Right.
We've got the art historical context.
Uh-huh.
Now for the real head scratcher.
Okay.
Camblin's own notes on Dance Amigo. I have to admit, when I first read these, I was like, what is going on? I felt like I was trying to, like, decipher some kind of secret code.
They are very cryptic.
Yeah.
He describes the painting as a phoenix, frozen in a salty shell, unable to burn itself to a new life.
Yeah.
Pretty striking image, wouldn't you say?
Definitely striking, but also, like, so confusing.
Uh-huh.
I mean, a phoenix frozen in salt?
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, the phoenix, in mythology is this bird that rises from its own ashes, symbolizing renewal and transformation.
Right.
But in Camlin's vision, this phoenix is trapped.
Uh-huh.
It's unable to complete that cycle.
Okay.
And that salty shell, it could be like a physical barrier, like, a layer of paint that's hardened.
Yeah.
Or maybe it represents some kind of emotional or psychological blockage
Right.
that's preventing this transformation.
Yeah, and this goes back to that idea of duality again, right?
It does.
Maybe one face of the figure represents, like, that yearning for transformation, for rebirth,
Yeah.
while the other represents, like, the fear or the resistance
Right.
holding it back.
That's a really insightful observation, and it's further kind of reinforced by that next line in his notes where he says, salty wings, a residue for those left behind to ponder and fret about. It almost feels like he's acknowledging, like, the frustration or confusion that his cryptic imagery might evoke in the viewer.
It's like he's saying, like, I'm not going to spell it out for you.
Right.
You have to wrestle with this. Engage with it on your own terms.
Right.
But then he throws in this, like, completely mind-blowing statement. He says, it folds back into itself some 80 billion years from now. The bird and I will sit and wait for that magnificent pulse.
Wow.
What are we supposed to make of that?
I think that really evokes this sense of, like, cosmic time, the vastness of the universe and the cyclical nature of existence.
Okay.
And I think the magnificent pulse, he could be referring to the Big Bang
Uh,
or some other cataclysmic event
right.
that marks the beginning and end of a universal cycle.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's saying that this struggle for transformation, this dance between opposites, isn't just happening, on a personal level,
Right.
but on this cosmic scale.
So how do we even begin to connect these, like, cryptic notes
Right.
back to the actual painting?
Mm-hmm.
It feels like we're dealing with two totally different languages.
I think the key is to understand Dance Amigo not as just a static image, but as this representation of a process.
A journey of transformation that's unfolding, across these vast stretches of time.
Okay.
And so that frozen phoenix, it might represent a particular moment within that larger cycle.
Okay.
A moment of stasis or struggle before that next burst of creation.
So it's like we're seeing a snapshot
Right.
of a much bigger story.
Exactly.
A story that, like, extends beyond the boundaries of the canvas
Yeah,
and into the depths of cosmic time.
exactly. And I think that's the beauty of Camblin's work, It invites us to step outside of our limited perspectives, to expand our understanding of ourselves and our place in, the grand scheme of things.
Wow. Okay. So much to think about. My brain kind of feels like that phoenix right now.
Yeah.
Frozen in salt, just like, whoa, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Camblin really, like, forces us to stretch our brains a little bit.
He does. He really challenges us to think differently about things.
Yeah.
But, that's part of what makes exploring his work so rewarding.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And, thinking about just how vast and, like, complex all of his ideas are.
Right.
It's almost a relief to remember one of his other quotes.
Yeah.
He says, I didn't learn anything new, but I know a lot more now. It's like a contradiction. But it kind of feels very relevant after going through all of this.
It's classic Camblin, isn't it?
Yeah.
A statement that seems paradoxical but actually like reveals a deeper truth.
Uh-huh.
And I think he's pointing out that true knowledge isn't just about accumulating information,
Right.
but it's about making those connections,
Yeah.
seeing how things relate to each other.
So it's less about like cramming our brains full of facts.
Right.
And more about having that like aha moment.
Exactly.
And you kind of see the bigger picture, how all the pieces fit together.
It's about synthesis. It's about, integrating new information with what we already know and letting it, change our perspective.
Yeah. It reminds me of something we were talking about earlier. Like Camblin's idea of communication going beyond language. Maybe that's what he means by knowing more.
Yeah.
It's not just about the words. It's about that deeper level of understanding.
Right.
That comes from like experiencing something yourself.
I think you've hit on something really important there. It's like with Dance Amigo, we can analyze the symbolism, we can talk about art movements, but ultimately it's that direct encounter with the artwork that allows us to truly, know it.
And maybe that applies to all kinds of knowledge, not just art.
Right.
It's about being open to new experiences, new ways of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And letting those experiences like transform us.
Absolutely. It's about being comfortable with ambiguity, with not always having all the answers.
Right.
And I think that's a really valuable lesson, especially in today's world, where we're constantly just bombarded with information.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in like needing to know everything.
Right.
And like categorizing and like defining everything.
Right.
But Camblin's reminding us that sometimes the most profound insights
come from like embracing the mystery, letting go of that need to like control or explain everything.
Yeah. He's encouraging us to, step off the train of thought.
Right.
Which is one of my favorite phrases of his.
Yeah.
And just, experience the world with an open heart and an open mind.
And I think that's the perfect note to end on.
It is.
So to all of you who joined us for this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin, we hope you're feeling inspired.
Yeah.
To like seek out his work and to explore his ideas for yourself.
Absolutely.
And don't be afraid to like get lost in the mystery a little bit.
Right.
To wrestle with those unanswered questions.
Because it's in those moments of uncertainty when we allow ourselves to be challenged.
Right.
And transformed by new experiences.
Yeah.
That we truly, begin to learn and grow.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Yes.
Keep questioning and keep diving deep.